Morning, everyone. Sorry we're a little late this morning. Had some technical difficulties with headphones. Always something, right?
Yep, it happens, right? The joys of live TV.
Yes. And so now I'm all wired in and I feel very constricted, but it's all good. It's all good. So we are continuing our conversation about the office of the vCIO. And today we're talking about something that I know so much about, which is the role of the engineer. And that was a lie. I don't know anything about this. So this is going to be a huge learning experience for me as well as for all of you. So Brian, you want to talk about the role of the engineer and tech.
Yep, so, one of the things that I want to talk about today is kind of what is the role of the engineer in these meetings? How do they help with the preparation process, and what does it really mean for them to participate, and what's the obligation that they're under? And those are some critical, concerns that I'd like to discuss a little bit today. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit about the circle of life first. And the circle of life is simply a concept that you need to kind of relay to your engineers, because they often question the reason that they're a part of these, showings to even begin with. And I apologize, I'm having technical problems too with my camera. So the circle of life is really simple. The engineer is assigned the task of doing the QBR, and a lot of times that's viewed by them as busy work. They feel like they're being penalized, put in the penalty box because they have to do these vCIO exercises, and they've already got a full-time job. They're already busy people. So, they look at it as something they can push off to the side. There's always a fire to fight. There's always a reason why they couldn't get to it. The problem is, it's the kickoff to the circle of life. When they conduct their assessment, they identify the gaps in process, system security, and training. From those gaps, we then are able to put together the recommendations that go into the customer's technology roadmap and serves as their budget. As they work on or as time goes by, they start buying those projects in those budget, and usually we're uncovering new opportunity that we wouldn't have understood without the assessment. And then ultimately, when we, when that happens, we make revenue, and everybody continues to get paychecks. So that's kind of the circle of life, right? If we're not doing the front end of this, which is the laborious end of this, we can't get to the other side of the equation, which is how do we get the return back into our business? So, this whole process drives predictable revenue to the customer. It fosters better client retention because you're getting to better understand your customer and getting to better engage with them. It opens up new opportunities for innovation with your customer. And all of that hinges with the engineer getting this process started when they're assigned their assessment to do for a client.
Awesome. Well, that's a really strong why. But what exactly is the role of the engineer whenever we're talking about like the TBR prep process?
Yeah, so the engineer often is paired up with the owner of the company or the vCIO, whoever's in the role of delivering the technology business review. And their job is to conduct an IT assessment. And in this IT assessment, we're looking at a number of different things. Performance, reporting, how are things running within the environment? Are we seeing metrics that we should be seeing? Is anything running low on resources? They're looking at security and patch levels. Do we have everything up to date? Do we have all the patches on our Windows machines? Do we have security? Are we up to date on firmware across all of our network items, or at least within a release or so of those firmware updates? Where do we stand in terms of obsolescence, as we go through this environment as well? So, what does our cybersecurity posture look like? And they're looking at some of the things that around authentication, credentialing, user groups, how those users have access to various systems. So they hold a critical part in really identifying where the gaps are, as I mentioned earlier, in process, systems, and training. Now, the vCIO comes in usually around policy, because that's more customer facing, and then some of the solution architecture as well. Another thing that's critical of the engineer is making sure that we're being contract compliant. Now, they might not even know what contract compliance means, but that really means, hey, if you identify something that you know we cover under our managed service contract, let's build a ticket. Let's get it into the system. Let's get this resolved before we even go out to the meeting, so we can prove that we're doing everything we say to do in our contracts, and we say we're going to do to our customers. But let's go even one step beyond that. We're making sure that we're minimizing the risk back to our businesses if a security breach were to happen and it was found that we weren't really doing the things we said in our contract. And again, nobody's being malicious in not doing these things. It's just the realities of life. Things happen fast. Sometimes things get overlooked. That test restore doesn't get done, or it's been a while since we've looked to see if some of the machines have caught up on patches, because just pushing them doesn't mean they're getting them. So those are the kind of things that we can do to make sure that we're contract compliant.
Cool. It really is showing, we talked in the first week about how, you can't really rely on finding this unicorn person who does all of the things. And this really shows how if you're thinking about it more as the office of the vCIO, where you have all of these parts supporting the vCIO in their job, you can see how the engineer really becomes part of the team.
Yeah, they have to be part of the team. One of the things that I often see when folks are rolling out, their QBR efforts, especially those folks that come through Ramp Camp, they don't bring the engineers into the process early enough. So while the executive team has made software evaluations, while the account management team and the vCIOs may have been brought into decision making, sometimes the engineers are left out until that decision's made. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that the engineers should be much more than an influencer in the process, but really it's about educating them to what's upcoming. So they understand, hey, this is coming our way. This is going to be a new service. Service managers can plan for it a little bit earlier, right? So you have to develop a level of trust between your vCIOs and your engineering team. And that level of trust starts by bringing them into the process, helping them understand, what you're going to do, helping them understand how that might impact some of their mix of day-to-day activities. And one step further, it's helping them understand that circle of life, so they know these are things that we need to do to stay engaged with our customers, generate revenue, make sure that we're being compliant in our contracts, and really making sure that we're not missing standardization that should be happening within our clients as well. So they're a critical component, even though sometimes it's usually passed to them, unfortunately, as here's the assessment, get it done by Friday. And with no direction, no understanding of what the goals are and why they're doing it. So that's one big piece. And of course, that dovetails right into you got to communicate. Keep that team informed. And vCIOs, when you come back from those meetings and you get good feedback, drop by the bullpen. Go see your engineers and tell them, hey, guys, thank you so much. They loved what they found. This is what we got new. You want to keep them excited and part of this process? Make sure that you are kind of letting them feel that success too, and feel the appreciation your customer shows you. Another critical component, though, is respecting each other's timelines, right? Mm-hmm. vCIOs, you cannot give these engineers this stuff 3 days before it's due, 2 days before it's due. We all have this inclination to go back to our college shelves and cram for the exam the day it's before it's due, right? But the problem is if we do that here, we're not going to give the engineers enough time to explore. Not to mention, we want to give them enough time to identify where there's gaps and let those gaps maybe get resolved so we can update that report and make sure that we're really showing our customers the things that we're doing. So we got to be mindful of their time. We also have to be mindful of any other deadlines they have. Hey, I'm looking to schedule out these vCIO events. Sometimes it's done by the vCIO themselves, sometimes it's done by a scheduler dispatcher. But maybe work with your service managers and say, hey, I've got these 3 vCIO events coming down the pike. Is my counterpart ready to take these on, or do we need to spread the wealth? Because, they might have other projects with other deadlines that are upcoming as well. And then the final thing is everybody must do right by the client. So in doing these assessments, if we're not doing them complete, A lot of times the vCIO is not technical enough. They're like you, Rachel, right? Learning this stuff on the fly. And if they're not technical enough, they can't see when things are incomplete in your report.
Sure.
So they might not see that a note that they're providing to a customer might not be the full picture because they just don't understand enough about the technology. So another, responsibility of the engineer and being a good teammate is really making sure that they do a complete job so their vCIO counterparts can, really run with that report and know that they're going to really help their customers, move things forward.
Great. Amazing. That all totally makes sense. Thank you so much for going into that. One thing I see is I feel like a very tangible thing for the engineer, because you talked about how sometimes they can see this as busy work, is that this can also be like a stepping stone for their own careers.
Yeah,
and that's like a really positive thing that you can present.
There's no doubt about that, right? The reality for the engineer is, there's two paths that engineers usually go down in career development. One path is being an individual contributor and really becoming a subject matter expert in some level of technology and really knowing it deep and owning that technology and potentially being the subject matter expert for that technology back to others on your team. So there's the traditional individual contributor route. And then there's the route of the folks that want to go into the management side of IT. And again, I'm not here to profess which is the right way. We need them all, right? And these days, I'd say it's probably easier to train the leader, as long as they got leadership skills, than it is to find some of the good talent out in the marketplace today, since it's so highly competitive. But, if you are looking to be a leader, if your aspirations are someday to be a CIO within a company or move into senior management within an MSP, or maybe even start your own MSP someday, you really should be looking at this as an opportunity to understand the business side of the house too. It gives you an opportunity to understand how these reports are getting generated. What is the messaging that is being sent to your customer? For your bigger customers, ask your vCIOs if you can tag along. I see a lot of times engineers going out in support of the vCIO with marquee clients or clients that might be co-managed where they have an IT department to support them. So give them some visibility into what this process looks like in the field so they can understand how to take a leadership role with their customer, how even though we don't work for the customer directly as employees, we're feeling the leadership gap that they have with no CIO or technical leader, and helping that business make decisions around innovation, helping them make decisions around security, helping guide them to make sure there's not gaps that can hurt that company in the long run. And this will really allow your engineers to see the full spectrum of it, but also start preparing their own career trajectories and get some of those soft skills that oftentimes we throw them into without any prep. Hey, Rachel, you've been a killer engineer, and I need now a service desk, a VP of service delivery. Come on into it, and you haven't experienced those other aspects of business. So, it just gives that opportunity there. And for managers, when you put your engineers on this, it could give visibility to some of your lower ranking employees at this stage, guys with potential, but that are in the junior part of their career, to other people in the organization so they can build a better trust bond with them as well. And I'll close with, if you don't do that, you can slow the process down and it can have an opposite effect. If we're not investing into our engineers, and most of you already know this, eventually they're going to find greener pastures. So if we're looking to cultivate a good team of individuals, people with know-how of our clients, and elevate them into new positions, the whole vCIO process and being part of the technical office of vCIO really gives them an opportunity to see how things operate underneath the covers. So, in short, that's kind of where the engineer interfaces with the vCIO process, what their roles and responsibilities are, and why you as managers, if you are from the ownership teams watching us today, why these things matter to you.
Yeah. And I can see, as we started today off with me admitting that I don't know anything about this part of the process, if someone, if you are a vCIO who is more customer background and not so much the tech background, it can be incredibly intimidating to start having to talk about all the technical stuff, especially in the beginning as you're starting to learn all of it. And having an engineer who's a solid team member and a part of helping you with all of this eliminates all those fears because you have someone you can rely on.
And put it into the customer perspective too. A lot of times they don't have a chance to meet their engineers. Now that may have changed a little bit here during COVID times where Zoom's been more prevalent, so it's easier to get those people involved versus when you have to go live on site, and that can be a 3-hour turnaround,
Sure.
conducting the meeting and commuting. But it's important that there's some connective tissue there too. The customers get to know these engineers. They get to know them pretty intimately, right? But they've really never put a face with a name or had an opportunity just to shake their hands and say thank you, right? So, it gives a good opportunity for that to happen. And for your engineer, I think sometimes if you do allow them to join your vCIO when there is an on-site QBR going on, it gives them an opportunity to see how the customer operates a little bit closer too. And that can really lend to support as well. So, that's why it's critical that, I'm a big believer in this concept of Office of vCIO, even if you have the vCIO quarterback, because it takes a village. We say that about everything else. Why are we trying to make this process just a single resource responsibility?
Absolutely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I think next week we're going to continue on this with the Office of the vCISO. Is that correct?
Yep, we're going to talk a little bit about building vCISO security offerings into your process as well, and how realistically your customer is just not seeing the difference between the vCIO and vCISO. As far as they're concerned, they're the same person. So are you providing that same level of support they're expecting you to provide them on the other side of the fence? So that's going to be our focus for next week.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who watched. Let us know if you have any questions about the role of the engineer, if there's something that you would like us to go a little bit deeper on, or questions about anything else having to do with account management.
All right, Rachel. Well, hey, and I think another great session this week. Appreciate you taking some time out with me today, and I hope everybody enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And Sean, thank you as well. And you better be here next week, because I know the vCISO process is a big part of what you're trying to do. All right, take care.